Namaskar. Dear learners, the objective of this session are to provide information on India's monumental heritage of Sultanate and Mughal period, give details on various types of museums and their holdings in India, and make you aware of the tourism potential of this rich cultural wealth India is endowed with. Monuments of the later period, the establishment and consolidation of the rule of the Turkish sultans in India established a regime that was in some respects different from the old. India now witnessed the emergence of a culture which combined elements of both indigenous and Islamic traditions. The most effective and distinct manifestation of this synthetic culture is to be seen in the architecture of this period. The new elements that were inherited, arch and dome. The building of true arch requires stones or bricks to be laid as voussoirs in the shape of a curve and bound together firmly by a good binding material. This binding material was lime mortar. The result of the introduction of the new technique was that the pre-Turkish forms, lintel and beam and corbelling, were replaced by true arches, and walls and the spired roof, that is shikhar, by domes. Arches are made in a variety of shapes, but in India, the pointed form of the Islamic world was directly inherited. And sometime in second quarter of the 14th century, another variant of the pointed form, the four-centered arch, was introduced by the Tughlaqs in their buildings. It remained in vogue till the end of the Sultanate period, but the construction dome demanded special techniques. The problem was to find suitable method for converting the square or rectangular top of the walls of the room into a circular base for raising a spherical dome. The best way to overcome this problem was to convert the square plan into a polygon by the use of squinches across the corners. Later, in the 15th century, stalactite preventives came to be used for the same purpose. Another element is decoration. The decorative art in the Islamic buildings served the purpose of concealing the structure behind motifs rather than revealing it. Since the depiction of living beings was generally frowned upon, the elements of decoration were, in most cases, limited to calligraphy, geometry, and foliation. It was by their manipulation that a rich and sumptuous effect was obtained in the buildings. But characteristically enough, no one type of decoration was reserved for a particular type of building. On the contrary, these pan-Islamic decorative principles were used for all kinds of buildings. Calligraphy is an important element of the decorative art in the buildings of this period. The Quranic sayings are inscribed on buildings in an angular, sober and monumental script known as Kufi. They may be found in any part of the building. Geometric shapes in abstract form are used in these buildings in a bewildering variety of combinations. The motifs indicate incorporation of visual principles, repetition, and generation of continuous patterns. of the foliations the dominant form of decoration employed in the arabesque. It is characterized by a continuous stem which splits regularly, producing a series of leafy secondary stems which can in turn split again or reintegrate into the main stem. The repetition of this pattern produces a beautifully balanced design with a three-dimensional effect. Stylistic evolution. Let us learn about evolution of the Indo-Islamic architectural style under the Sultans of Delhi and the Mughals, and to highlight the features that characterize its more prominent phases. Sultanate architecture. Under Sultanate architecture, let us do the early form first. The history of Indo-Islamic architecture proper commences with the occupation of Delhi by the Turks in AD 1192. The Tomar citadel of Lal Kot with its Chauhan extension called Kila Rai Pithoda was captured by Qutubuddin Aibak. Here he began the construction of Jama Masjid, which was completed in 1198. According to an inscription on the mosque, it was known as Quwwat-ul-Islam and was built from the wreckage of 27 Hindu and Jain temples demolished by the conquerors. Again, 1199, expansive screen with lofty arches was raised across the entire front of the sanctuary of the mosque. In both these constructions, the hand of the local architect is quite evident. The carved columns and slabs have been used liberally by only turning their carved sides inwards or using them upside down. The arches of the screen have been built by employing the method of corbelling, and the ornamentation of the screen is emphatically Hindu in conception. However, the borrowed elements of Hindu architecture were soon discarded and relatively little was retained by the maturing Indo-Islamic style. In later buildings of this phase, such as Qutub Minar, Adai Din Ka Jhopda, Iltutmish's tomb, though corbelling could not be replaced as the principal structural technique, decoration became almost fully Islamic in detail. In this connection, the principles employed in the construction of the domical roof of Iltutmish's tomb are also of great interest. The dome was raised with the help of cobbled courses. It was supported on quinches. Moving to the Khiljis, with their architecture as revealed in Alai Darwaza at Qutub Complex and Jamaat Khana Masjid at Nizamuddin, a marked change in style. In the evolution of Indo-Islamic architecture, this phase occupies a key position as it exhibits a distinct influence of the Seljuk architectural traditions, a Turkish tribe ruling over Central Asia and Asia Minor in 11th to 13th century, as also certain salient features of composition which were adopted in succeeding styles. The characteristic features of this phase may be listed as employment of true arch, pointed horseshoe in shape, emergence of true dome with recessed arches under the squinch, use of red sandstone and decorative marble reliefs as new building materials, emergence of new masonry facing consisting of a narrow course of headers alternating with a much wider course of stretchers, a Seljuk feature. In addition, the decorative features characterized by calligraphy, geometry and arabesque now became much bolder and profuse. For the Tughlaqs, a new architectural style came into vogue in the buildings of this period. Judging from the remains, only the first three rulers of this house appear to have been interested in the art of building. However, the architecture of this period can be divided into two main groups. To the first group belong the construction of Ghiyasuddin and Muhammad Tughlaq, and the other to those of Firoz Tughlaq. The general features of the Tughlaq style of architecture are: stone rubble is the principal building material, and the walls are in most cases plastered. The walls and bastions are invariably battered, the effect being most marked at the corners. A hesitant and possibly experimental use of a new shape of arch, the four-centered arch, necessitating its reinforcement with a supporting beam. This arch beam combination is a hallmark of Tughlaq style. The pointed horseshoe arch of the preceding style was abandoned. Emergence of a pointed dome with clearly visible neck in contrast with rather stifled dome of the preceding style. Introduction of encaustic tiles as an element of decoration in the panels of the buildings. Emergence in the tombs of this period of an octagonal plan which came to be copied and perfected by the Mughals in the 16th and 17th century. An additional feature was the element of reduced ornament. The final phase under the Sultanate period, within a decade of the death of Firoz Shah Tughlaq, the Sultanate became politically unstable and in 1398 attacked and plundered by Timur. However, some resemblance of central authority was retained with the two succeeding dynasties of the Sayyids and the Lodhis, although they ruled over a greatly shrunken Sultanate of Delhi between 1414 and 1526. A larger number of tombs were built in and around Delhi, so much so that over a period of time the area around Delhi looked like a sprawling Qabristan. Yet, some of these structures are important from architectural point of view and can be considered as heralding a distinct style. The more important of these tomb buildings took two separate forms, the distinguishing features of which are mausoleums designed on an octagonal plan, incorporating the following elements like main tomb chamber surrounded by an arched veranda, one-story high, veranda with projecting caves supported on brackets. The other type was built on a square plan. These were characterized by absence of veranda around the main tomb chamber, exterior comprised of 2 and sometimes 3 stories, absence of caves and supporting brackets. There is an original treatment of colored tile decoration in these buildings. It is set sparingly in friezes. In addition, there are intricately incised surfaces of plaster. Now let us learn about the Mughal architecture in India. The establishment of Mughal rule in India in 1526 revitalized Indo-Islamic architecture. The new rulers effected an amalgam of the prevalent architectural forms and techniques with those brought from Central Asia and Persia. The result of their efforts was the emergence of one of the most splendid building types in India. It is true that Mughal style of architecture took a concrete form during the reign of Akbar, yet the basic principles of Mughal architecture were provided by Babur and Humayun, the two predecessors of Akbar. Buildings of Babur. Babur had a short reign of 5 years, most of which was spent in fighting battles for the consolidation of the newly born Mughal state. He is, however, known to have taken considerable interest in building works. It is unfortunate that very little of this work is extant today. The only standing structures of Babur's reign are the two mosques built in 1526 at Panipat and Sambhal. But both these structures are commonplace and possess no architectural merit. Buildings of Humayun. The surviving buildings of Humayun's reign have the same inconsequential character as that of Babur. The Mughal domination over India was too unsettled for the production of any great work of architecture. Moreover, Humayun had to spend 15 long years of his life in exile in Persia during the ascendance of the Sur dynasty in Delhi. However, two mosques from amongst several other buildings erected during the first phase of his reign survive. One of these lies in ruinous condition at Agra, the other is at Ahemdabad in Hisar. But both these structures are devoid of any architectural distinctiveness, much in the same manner as the Mosque of Babur. Humayun's return to Delhi in 1555 was short-lived. There are in fact no notable buildings of this time. Mention may, however, be made of Humayun's tomb as a structure which was inspired by the Persian culture imbibed by Humayun during his exile. This building is in fact a landmark in the development of the Mughal style of architecture. The construction began in 1564 after Humayun's death under the patronage of his widow Hamida Banu Begum. The architect of the building was Mirak Mirza Ghias, a native of Persia. He brought many Persian craftsmen to Delhi to work on the structure, and their skills and techniques were liberally employed. The tomb has thus become representative of an Indian rendition of a Persian concept. Moving to Akbar's architecture, Akbar's reign can be taken as the formative period of Mughal architecture. It represents the finest example of the fusion of Indo-Islamic architecture. The architecture of the reign of Akbar represents encouragement of the indigenous techniques and a selective use of the experience of other countries. The chief elements of the style of architecture that evolved under Akbar's patronage can be listed as: the buildings mainly used red sandstone as the building material, a widespread use of the tarbiated construction, the arches used mainly in decorative form rather than in structural form, the dome was of the Lodhi type, sometimes built hollow but never technically of the true double order. The shafts of the pillars were multifaceted, and the capitals of these pillars invariably took the form of bracket supports, and the decoration comprised of boldly carved or inlaid patterns complemented by brightly colored patterns on the interiors. Akbar's building projects can be divided into two main groups, each representing a different phase. The first group comprised buildings of forts and a few palaces mainly at Agra, Allahabad and Lahore. The second group related basically to the construction of his new capital at Fatehpur Sikri. Architecture under Jahangir and Shah Jahan. In the sphere of building art, Jahangir and Shah Jahan's reigns were an age of marble. The place of red sandstone was soon taken over by marble in its most refined form. This dictated significant stylistic changes, which have been: the arch adopted a distinctive form with foliated curves, usually with inner cusps, Marble arcades of engrailed arches became a common feature. The dome developed a bulbous form with stifled neck. Double domes became very common. Inlaid patterns in colored stones became the dominant decorative form, and in the buildings from the latter half of the Jahangir's reign, a new device of inlay decoration called Pitra Deora was adopted. In this method, semi-precious stones such as lazuli, onyx, jasper, topaz and cornelian were embedded in the marble in graceful foliations. The final phase of the Mughal architecture. Aurangzeb had none of his father's passion for architecture. Under him, the generous encouragement given by his predecessors to the art was almost withdrawn. The architectural works during the reign of Aurangzeb were less numerous and of a lower standard than those executed under any previous Mughal ruler. In Delhi itself, the capital city of the empire, very few buildings are associated with his name. The major buildings included the mausoleum of his wife Rabia ud Duran in Aurangabad, the Badshahi Masjid in Lahore and the Moti Masjid in Lal Killa, Delhi. After Aurangzeb's death in 1707, the collapse of the empire was only a matter of time. The few buildings that were built during the first half of the 18th century amply testify the descendant condition that ensued. The Safdarjung's tomb at Delhi is the most important building of this period. It is located amidst a large garden and copies the plan of Taj Mahal. Now moving from Mughal era to the Christian architecture. The Portuguese settlements on the western coast produced an architecture that was distinctly Gothic in character. Some important places where this architecture may be seen are Goa, Bessin, Daman, Diu, and these buildings can be in form of churches, forts and public buildings. Sikh architecture. The most prominent Sikh architecture belonging to this period is none other than the famous Golden Temple at Amritsar. The temple was built in 17th century and incorporated prevalent architectural styles. Public buildings. Apart from the royal buildings, there were other buildings grouped as public buildings and public works, as almost all these types were intended for public and civic purposes. They comprised of sarais, bridges, dams, kacheris, prison, houses, kotwali, dak chowki, hammam, etc. Now, let us learn about museums. Museums are repositories of great cultural wealth. Our heritage in this regard is shaped by museums almost as much as by standing monuments. The British were the pioneers in establishing the museums in India around the 19th century. They began by setting up institutions like the Geological Survey of India and the Botanical Survey. Soon, however, British officers and scholars fascinated by India's ancient past established Archaeological Survey and the Asiatic Society. Their purpose was to explore the old and rich culture of India. Gradually, as the collections grew, the British took the initiative to set up museums. The first Indian museum was established in Kolkata in 1875. Lord Curzon, the viceroy of that time, and Sir John Marshall, the head of Archaeological Survey, together contributed and established site museums. These are specialized in content and have collection of archaeological findings of a particular region like of Sanchi, Sarnath and Khajuraho. The individuals belonging to the educated upper classes, due to the nationalist sentiments, started collecting materials which they already had access to. The pioneering work done by these individuals can be seen in Ashutosh Museum of Indian Art in Kolkata, the Tata collection in the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, Mumbai, the Calico Museum in Ahemdabad, Raja Kelkar Museum in Pune. There are different types of museum. Let us learn about the different types of museum. During the last 4 or 5 decades, a variety of museums have been set up in India. Let us briefly learn about some important museums. The National Museum, New Delhi. The collections which are exhibited here are originally the items which were sent to London in 1947 for an exhibition at Royal Academy. All these collections were housed at Rashtrapati Bhavan before shifting to its present building in 1960. The collection of items which were brought back after exhibition from Britain were not sent back to their respective owners or museums. Instead, it was decided to display them at the National Museum. The museum presently holds approximately 2 lakh objects of a diverse nature, both Indian as well as foreign, and its holdings cover a time span of more than 5,000 years of Indian cultural heritage. The National Museum has different galleries. These galleries have been arranged according to the general historical and chronological sequences. The museum has the collection starting from the Indus Valley civilization. It also has the collection of sculptures of modern dynasty Sunga art, the art of Gandhara, and the sculptures from Mathura in Uttar Pradesh have been displayed. The Gupta period has an influence on many regional styles of art. During this time, the first Hindu temple was built. The museum has sculptures of Buddha, Vishnu, and many others from this period. The museum also has collection of objects discovered and found along the silk routes. These items like Indian textile, decorative arts, ivory work, tribal art, metal images, antique jewelry, etc., which were found by Sir Orlstein, have been housed here. Another museum, the National Crafts Museum and Huskily Academy, New Delhi. The artists and craftsmen have tried to keep their traditions alive all these centuries. Thus, the Crafts Museum has the collection of Indian crafts of different media ranging from clay, wood, textiles, basket work, cane and bamboo to metal and others. At present, the museum collection consists of over 33,000 specimens in various crafts acquired over a period of 60 years, collected from various states of India. The National Gallery of Modern Art. This is exclusively dedicated for Indian paintings and sculptures of the post-1857 era with permanent displays in some galleries. Other galleries in this museum are used to exhibition temporary art. The Gandhi Memorial Museum at Rajgarh. This museum has been dedicated to Mahatma Gandhi. 2 museums and a monument relate to the story of his life. The Gandhi Memorial Museum at Rajgarh has a collection of photo documents and the life of Gandhi. This also includes his belongings like documents, letters, paintings, books, records, etc. The other, called the Gandhi Smriti Museum at Birla House, is a place where he was assassinated. This consists of belongings like a simple bed, a mat on the floor, his spinning wheel, books and his spectacles. The museum also displays the pictures of his wounded body and other related to it. Another museum, the Calico Museum at Ahemdabad. It is founded in 1949. The collection shows rare exhibits of exquisite fabrics from different parts of India. Another museum, the Utensils Museum at Ahemdabad, which displays the utensils of India. It is the brainchild of Suren Patel and is exclusively concerned with Indian utensils. The Salarjung Museum in Hyderabad. Hyderabad's Nizam have made a fantastic collection in their museum. It has a variety of objects that excite one's curiosity. The range of its collection is amazingly diverse. A variety of cloth is just one example. Now let us sum up this session. The monuments and museums are together in the true sense the flag bearers of India's cultural heritage. Fortunately, we have a large number of monuments which can be called live structures. Similarly, India has a number of good museums displaying a variety of cultural objects. as a professional in tourism sector, it is earnest upon you to simultaneously work for the protection and preservation of this treasure trove besides using it for professional purposes. Dhanyavad.